Many months ago, someone made an assertion that a specific pair of airplane brands and models are unable to fly beyond a certain speed at a certain altitude. I did a video explaining that they were wrong, showing people how to look it up, and I also brought up exactly what they were complaining about and their assertions. I also brought up the counter-arguments in the video, which is what you should do. And I included them in the description for the video. Now, because I've done that, YouTube has decided to tear the video down, and it may not be temporary, it may be permanent. So this video will be about the technical limitations for two aircraft. One of them is the safe cruising altitude speed for two aircraft, and the other one is going to be its maximum testable limit, and then designed limit. The tested limit is what I'm using here, meaning this is how fast you can fly the airplane, seat of your pants style, at various altitudes, and it worked out to a certain number. The test criteria that I mentioned in the previous video, or didn't, was that this was done by testing it at different altitudes to find out what Mach number it is. Now, what is that? What that means is that depending on your altitude, the speed of sound is different because the air is more or less dense. People will bring up that it's based on temperature. That's not relevant. They're directly related to each other, but not all the time. Air pressure changes, and that causes the density to change, and that causes the speed of sound to change. And people will start cat-like typing and screaming out because they prefer the temperature model versus the air pressure model, and I understand that. And you're both wrong because they don't give a shit. It's a damn number. It's a certain number of miles per hour, knots, which is very confusing because it sounds like you're talking about miles an hour sometimes, or kilometers per hour, which is unambiguous but overly precise because the number varies by the hour. So you have to round all these numbers off. Mach 1, the speed of sound at sea level, is approximately 761 miles an hour, 661 knots, or 1,225 kilometers an hour. Now, that number is going to be wrong depending on where you look it up, because they're basing it on local measurements, or the gradient in that part of the world, or that part of that sea coastline, or whatever. But that's the accepted numbers I looked up from one source. It actually matched with a dozen of them, but I'm going to say it was one source so you can sit there and type out that I'm wrong and explain why. Now, if you go up 1,368 feet, which was the argument max height brought up, it only changes by being 1% lower. So I took the same numbers and multiplied them by 0.99 and came up with numbers that are a lower number. It lowers as you go to higher altitude, or it increases in speed. Again, I could be making a mistake here. Again, you're allowed to look up what the speed of sound is at 1,000 feet versus at sea level. And you can find out that you're going to get slightly different answers depending on how old the documentation is and whether or not someone sat down and just measured how fast the speed of sound was on a particular day. Someone will now bring up transonic speed for aircraft. If you're not aware of this, airplanes that are not designed to exceed the speed of sound or get near it, which is an area below the speed of sound, it's called the transonic range or whatever, if it's not designed correctly, the plane will pull itself apart. Even planes that are designed to go at or above the speed of sound experience some turbulence at that point because the airplane is literally moving at a speed faster than the propagation of sound. Now, the 757, it's a Boeing, can travel at 0.86 Mach. That's its ranking for its maximum speed, right? Or is that its maximum cruising speed? Again, I'm not mentioning which it is. We're talking about what its maximum speed is, period. People use a very vague term. Well, is it max safe speed, max cruising constant speed, max efficiency speed, which is a different number? Or is it the max speed where it's still controllable? The 767 can travel at 0.8 Mach. Now, what are these numbers? Now, I'm basing this on speed of sound at sea level because, again, the difference between 1,368 feet, which isn't even the altitude we're talking about, it's actually higher, is only 1% lower in speed than at sea level. So we're just going to use sea level. Again, it's not a difference. The difference between 753 and 761 miles per hour is not a big deal if the max airspeed for the 767 is 654 miles an hour, or 568 knots. Yes, that's lower than Mach 1 because it's 0.86 Mach for the 757. The 767, it's 608 miles an hour, or 528 knots. Now, since that's the lowest speed, that's lower speed for both of them, we're going to use 0.8. We're going to call that the max speed, even though the 757 can go faster. So we're going to say 608 miles an hour is the maximum speed between sea level and, let's say, 1,370 feet. Let's round it off just a teensy bit, 2 feet. Okay? All right. So someone claimed that an airplane, these airplanes in 3 incidents, were flying too fast for their altitude. 530 miles an hour, 590 miles an hour, and 465 miles an hour are supposed to be faster than 608 miles an hour. That literally is the entire video right there. And obviously it isn't. In order for that to be the claim, you'd have to claim that the airplane suddenly dropped from being Mach 0.8 rated at these altitudes. These are the tested altitudes, by the way. This is actually test data of how high they flew the airplane. By the way, getting the sea level rating by flying them over Death Valley. Over Death Valley, because it's so far in the ground, you can actually fly it at quote-unquote sea level without hitting water because it's a desert. The planes were flying at 0.6 Mach up to 0.77 Mach. That one is pushing it, but the airplanes are rated to 0.8 or 0.86 Mach. And yes, the one that was 0.86 Mach was the one that was traveling probably at 0.77, but it doesn't matter. Neither airplane was exceeding their maximum mechanical limited speed, the limit beyond which they do really quote-unquote start falling apart when the wings fall off. The maximum airspeed for Boeing 757 and 767 is over Mach 0.8, period, full stop. That's 528 knots, 608 miles an hour, or 980 kilometers an hour at 1,368 feet, which is the highest altitude someone could come up with to complain about this. They didn't talk about the plane coming in from a higher altitude at a high speed. They're talking about the airspeed at that height or below, down to sea level, and erroneously saying at sea level on the East Coast where they would be hitting water, they couldn't possibly go that fast. Well, that's kind of a funny joke, but that's not what we're talking about. So in 7 minutes and 20 seconds, I've explained to you that a claim that these airplane types, a 767 and 757, the claim that they could not fly at the speed they were going in these 3 specified cited incidents was not in excess of 0.8 Mach at that altitude. There isn't any ambiguity. That's it. YouTube, however, has decided to flag the video for hate speech. A video where I explained the maximum airspeed for 2 different airplanes from Boeing on a specific date in a specific year, which I'm not allowed to include in the title or discuss, because they'll flag it as hate speech. Because I disproved conspiracy theorists that were preaching hate speech against various groups of people, oddly enough including Americans, while claiming, for some reason, to be patriots. YouTube protected them by taking down yet another video a few days ago. I just found out about it because I checked my email. Because I told people how fast an airplane can go at maximum speed that year. Because I had to include the fact that it was a certain year to make sure that every airplane made from that year backwards was included in this, because someone's going to weasel out of this discussion by bringing up an airplane from a different era. These airplanes had engines that were about 16 feet long. One of the airplanes had a 156-foot wingspan. The other one had a 125-foot wingspan. One of them had a 18 by 12 foot by 160-foot body approximately. The other one had a 12 by 17 by 155-foot body. That doesn't mean any difference. It's not relevant. What's relevant is their stated airspeed that they're supposed to be operated at, so you get good efficiency, is far below the maximum speed they can fly at when they're tested. And the individuals flying these aircraft on a single day that I'm not allowed to tell you the name of because I'll get flagged for hate speech by mentioning the time and date stamp, the people who flew them didn't care if they killed themselves. They flew the airplanes at a maximum speed that would still be controllable. It is not uncontrollable at this speed, and it is not a speed where the wings fall off just because you magically decide that when you're near sea level, not at sea level on the East Coast where you're hitting the ground or water, it's not impossible to fly the airplane that way. That and the fact they didn't care if they harmed themselves or the people in the airplane. Maximum safe speed for you and me to make it safely to an airport, is not the same as the speed of somebody who doesn't give a shit whether they live or die. And also, if you're not aware of it, There are incidents where airplanes had to be flown beyond their limits in order to save people because the airplane went out of control and they had to pull out of a dive. Those incidents show the speed ratings for these specific aircraft being exceeded and showing no mechanical damage or fatigue to the frame. The wings did not come off. The plane flew safely. It was an unsafe flying condition that didn't kill anybody. So someone claiming magically on a specific day, only one day of the year, in a specific year, that nobody could fly planes at their rated speed, at maximum rated speed, is poppycock. And YouTube flagging my video pointing out that this is bullshit and being the only video, I'm not kidding, that absolutely put this information up where you could read it, flagging it is a disservice. If people wanted to look this up, they could find out about it. It had lots of comments from people who did not address the subject matter. They did not look up whether I got something wrong here. And by the way, everything I just quoted to you, when you read it below, you're going to find an error if you're really careful. I made a math error. I may have even verbalized it or not. I'm not going to give you a hint. Instead of critiquing me by saying, fuck you, and then calling me a specific racial group's name, which is hate speech, not one of the people critiquing that video pointed out that I made a simple math error, which I just found. They also didn't point out that I might have gotten information wrong or backwards. I might have stated the maximum test speed as being the maximum controllable speed when it wasn't. I could have gotten that wrong. Nobody even bothered to do that. They just said they didn't like the answer because it disproved their bullshit story. And they're always the ones who say, if we find one error in your narrative, it's all a lie. Well, if I find one error in your counter-narrative, then it's all a lie. The trouble is, that's not what happened. I find errors, more accurately, lies on your side's part because you keep fucking lying. YouTube flagged a video that is, except for the person asking the questions, saying things and not wanting to actually back it up, except for that part where I mentioned what the person said to me, the entire video is literally about what is the maximum airspeed for a 767 and a 757. It's 0.8 Mach at the lowest, 608 miles an hour, 528 knots, 980 kilometers an hour. That'll be the title of the video. The answer. What's the maximum flying speed for a southbound swallow? Now, here's the next part of it. YouTube taking the video down just takes a lot of hate speechers who have been doing this for how many decades? 2? Who are lying. It doesn't take them to task. Their videos do not get taken down when they make these claims. They're making claims that are completely boring, or Boeing, lying about the maximum airspeed for a plane. And it didn't help that Boeing did not put up their maximum mechanical limited airspeed for these planes. You have to go look it up out of a PDF, and I linked to it. Now, the other thing they flagged me for, and this is very important, excessive use of links going to Wikipedia? Yeah, this is the thing now. So what was the subject matter? I mentioned a certain date in the previous decades, just after Y2K, plus a few months, several months. And I mentioned that people making claims about what they can get pictures of and video of a set of incidents that all happened on one day, they only look at the ones that obscure information instead of the completely clear information. They only show pictures that prove what they want to believe, and they ignore anybody pointing out that the next picture right next to it on the website they picked disproves their claim. And these people get very angry and are willing to flag your video with 100 accounts if they can. How is this triggering you for me to look up shit you didn't? I'm explaining this, and I may make a mistake. You're allowed to critique my mistakes, and I will acknowledge them and correct it and put up another video that has the same data. Your assertion that these airplanes could not exceed 608 miles an hour may be true, but they weren't flying that speed at the altitude you were talking about. None of this shit that people spew is accurate. And then they start quoting knots because knots are a different number, and they don't tell you they're talking about knots or miles an hour. I'm not being deceitful. I'm explaining things. I'm not hiding my sources. I give them to you, and I ask you to tell me how I got it wrong. And these assholes can't do anything other than threaten people or call them a specific ethnic group's name. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.